Welcome to another episode of the Construction Leading Edge podcast. My name is Todd DeWalt, and my job here is to help you grow your leadership skills, grow your business, and grow your income. In this episode, we're going to talk about a concept, a principle that can give you exponential results in your business and your personal productivity while reducing the amount of time you spend. That's right, exponential results, increased output for reduced input. It's the principle that Warren Buffett used to become a multi-billionaire, and we're going to talk about how you can apply that to your business. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's get started. So if you're like a lot of people who are running a construction business, you own a construction business, or you're just running a project, more than likely you're extremely busy. There is always something that you can do. There's never a lack of work to be done. Everything around you can be improved. You see all these opportunities for improved efficiency. If you own a business or you're in business development, there are always opportunities for new types of work, all these shiny objects out there that you could be chasing. You can always take on more clients. There's always more people you can work for. Your productivity of your crews can always improve. Your personal productivity can always improve. And chances are you have some employees who can improve. Maybe you've got some problem employees, some people who are not pulling their weight necessarily. So what you may have done in the past, or what you may be currently doing right now to deal with these things, is you could be multitasking. You could just be trying to juggle all the balls, and you've got all these balls up in the air. You could just work harder. You could be working more hours. Whenever there's more work to be done, or you need to get more output, you may just start working more. You may be taking on any type of work that comes along. Maybe you're bidding on every job that comes your way. Maybe you may be hiring everyone who passes the mirror test. And if you're not sure what the mirror test is, that means you hold up a little mirror in front of their face, and if they fog up the mirror, then boom, you hire them. That's the mirror test. And you may be working for anybody who will hire you. Anybody who's willing to give you money, you'll do whatever it is that they want you to do, even if it's not necessarily in your wheelhouse. So you may be thinking that there's a linear relationship between activity and reward. In other words, you may think that there's a one-to-one relationship between input and output. If you need to get more output, then the answer is just to put more time in. You may think to double your profit, you just bid twice as much work. Or you may think that to double your production, you just hire twice as many people, right? Seems logical, but it's not accurate. See, here's the reality. Activity and reward are not linear. It's not a linear relationship between activity and reward. It's not a one-to-one relationship. If you were to look at a graph with activity along the bottom and output along the vertical axis, as you increase activity, you don't necessarily get an increase in output. The reality is that in business, almost every activity is a waste of your time. And very few things are exceptionally valuable. I'll say that again. The reality is that in business, almost every activity, almost everything you're doing is a waste of time. And very few things are exceptionally valuable. All right, so let me give you a couple of examples of this principle. There was a guy by the name of Isaac Pittman who published a book back in the mid-1830s. And what was interesting, the interesting discovery that Isaac Pittman made was that just 700 words make up 2/3 of the English language. So there are, according to Google, 1,025,000 words in the English language. Well, this guy Pittman figured out that 700 of those words make up 2/3 of the language that is used on a regular basis. So he created shorthand. He created this system of shorthand and invented a series of scribbles, basically, to allow people to write those 700 words that make up 2/3 of the language. So 700 words out of 1,025,000 make up 67% of the spoken language. Here's another example. Think of Warren Buffett's philosophy. He said this in a book that Mary Buffett and David Clark wrote called The Tao of Warren Buffett. Buffett is quoted as saying, "You only have to do a few things right in your life, so long as you don't do too many things wrong." Warren decided that early in his career, it would be impossible for him to make hundreds of right investment decisions. So he decided that he would only invest in the businesses that he was absolutely sure of. So he decided there's no way he could make hundreds of right decisions. He decided he was only going to invest in a few businesses that he was absolutely sure of, and then he would bet heavily on those. Today, he owes 90% of his wealth to just 10 investments. And Warren Buffett is quoted as saying, "Sometimes what you don't do is just as important as what you do." Currently, Berkshire Hathaway's portfolio is over $109 billion, and half of their holdings are concentrated in 4 stocks: Wells Fargo, IBM, Coca-Cola, and American Express. Out of $109 billion in holdings, half of those, over $50 billion, consist of 4 stocks, and 90% of his wealth comes from just 10 investments. So where did Pittman and Warren Buffett come up with these principles from? Was Pittman just lucky that he stumbled across this concept? Was Warren Buffett lucky that he figured out that the vast majority of his wealth would just come from a handful of investments? Was it coincidence? Was it just dumb luck? I don't think so. I think they tapped into a principle that was figured out over 200 years ago. So let's go back. In the mid-1800s, there was a guy by the name of Vilfredo Pareto, or Pareto. I'm sure that's not the right Italian pronunciation, but Vilfredo Pareto was born in 1848 in Paris. His father was an Italian civil engineer from France, and he was an Italian civil engineer. They lived in France, and Vilfredo's mother was from France. Vilfredo went on to earn a doctor's degree in engineering, and he even worked as a civil engineer after he graduated, first for a state-owned Italian railroad company, and then later in private industry. He was also the manager of the ironworks of San Giovanni Valdarno, and later he was a general manager of the Italian ironworks. So this guy was an engineer. But as he progressed through his career, he got more and more interested in economics. In the early 1900s, Pareto made the famous observation that 20% of the population of Italy owned 80% of the property. In other words, 20% of the wealth in the country of Italy was, or 20% of the population was responsible for 80% of the wealth in Italy. It's also said that Pareto was a gardener, and he realized that 80% of his peas came from 20% of his pea pods. I don't know if that's true or not, but he figured out that there was this principle of unequal distribution. Years later, a guy by the name of Joseph Juran, or Juran, who was one of the fathers of the quality movement, called this insight of unequal distribution the Pareto principle, which is commonly known today as the 80-20 rule. And Juran applied this beyond economics and even beyond pea pods. In his book, The Quality Control Handbook, Juran called this, quote, the law of the vital few. Again, the law of the vital few. His observation was that you could massively improve the quality of a product by resolving a tiny fraction of the problems. In other words, he did not propose distributing your energy across all of the problems, but he figured out you could massively improve the quality of a product by resolving a tiny fraction of the problems. Fortunately for him, he found a willing audience in Japan, where the country had been producing low-cost, low-quality goods. Now, by adopting this quality process, the phrase, quote, made in Japan, end quote, gained a totally new meaning, and we see that today. Now, gradually, the quality revolution led to Japan's rise as a global economic power. So, what I'm saying is that the Pareto principle is simply the observation that most things in life are not distributed evenly. Pittman realized that a very small percentage of the words in the English language made up the vast majority of the spoken language. Warren Buffett figured out that he could focus his energy on a handful of investments, and that's where the vast majority of his wealth would come from. Pareto figured out that 80% of the wealth in Italy was held by 20% of the population. And Durand figured out that the vast majority of the problems could be eliminated in a process by focusing on a tiny fraction of the issues. So beyond Peapods and Italian wealth, we can apply this in business today, and there's been several books written about this concept, stating that 20% of the input creates 80% of the result. More specifically, 20% of the workers probably produce 80% of the results. 20% of customers create 80% of the revenue. In the software industry, 20% of the bugs cause 80% of the crashes. In most products, 20% of the features cause 80% of the usage. Now, is this always 80-20? No, not necessarily. It could be 70-30, 80-20, could be 99-1. But there's an unequal distribution in most parts of the world, especially in the business. So how can you tap into this principle? How can you apply this to your business, especially in the construction industry? How can you leverage this principle in your business? Here's 8 things that I want to share with you. These are 8 ways that you can leverage the 80-20 principle in your business. Number 1, safety. Here's an interesting statistic. According to OSHA, in the year 2013, there were 828 deaths in the construction industry. They found that the leading causes of worker deaths on construction sites were 4 things: falls, struck by objects, electrocution, and caught in between. They called these the fatal 4, and they found that the fatal 4 issues were responsible for more than 57% of the construction worker deaths in that year. They figured out that eliminating the fatal 4, which were falls, 1, struck by objects, number 2, electrocution, number 3, and caught in or caught between, number 4. By eliminating these fatal 4, it would save 478 workers' lives in America every year. 4 situations cause almost 60% of the deaths. 4 situations, if they were eliminated, it would save 478 lives in America every year. So that's safety. Number 2, you can apply this principle to the profits in your business. The majority of your profits come from a few customers, and they come from a few types of projects, or if you have products, the majority of your profits come from a few of your products. I heard an interesting story from a guy named Dr. Henry Cloud. He's an author and a consultant, well-known speaker. He told a story about a friend of his who bought a company, and it was, I can't remember the number, but I think somewhere around $25 to $50 million a year company. This was a big company. He realized pretty quickly that, in his words, the life of the business was in about 25% of what that company did. So he announced to the company that they would eliminate everything except what made up the life of the business. Now, there was a lot of resistance. It was very counterintuitive, but they did that within 18 months, and as a result of eliminating everything and focusing all their efforts on the life of the business, the business grew almost exponentially. It was tremendously successful. So the vast majority of your profits most likely come from a few customers, a few types of the work you do, or a few of your products. Number 3, employees. The majority of your production comes from a few of your employees. The majority of your profits are a result of a few of your employees, and the majority of your problems are coming from a small minority of your employees. So I'm sure you could, if you think right now in your business, in your team, on your project, there's probably there's a noisy minority that is causing problems. And then on the flip side of that, there's a minority of people, there's a handful of people they're the guys and gals who are making it happen. They're the straws that stir the drink, so to speak. They're the ones that are contributing to the results. So number 4, productivity. Let's talk about productivity by your crews, by the folks in your office, by the folks on your factory floor. 80% of the inefficiency in your production activities are probably caused by a small number of issues or bottlenecks. Maybe there's some bureaucrat who's holding up a process. Perhaps there's a poor flow of information. People don't have the information they need when they need it. There could be a scheduling problem. There could be a manpower shortage. Maybe there's some process that needs to be streamlined. But if you were to look at it, I would just about guarantee that the vast majority of the inefficiency in your production activities is caused by a small number of issues or bottlenecks. And if you'll eliminate those bottlenecks, then things will open up and you'll see a dramatic increase in production. Number 5, specific to everybody in the construction industry, estimating. You're bidding on work, you're trying to get jobs. When you're bidding on work, it's very likely that 80% of the cost lies in 20% of the line items. Let me say that again. When you're bidding on work, it's very likely that 80% of the cost of that project you're bidding on lies in 20% of the line items. So when you're bidding a project, if you have a week or 2 weeks, you need to focus your effort on the 80%. So if you're bidding, let's say you're a general contractor and you're bidding on a new building, you don't need to spend your time on door hardware and toilet partitions and what color the exit lights are going to be. You need to focus on the big ones: site work, structural steel, HVAC, and electrical. You need to figure out where the bulk of the cost lives in that project and then focus on that first. Focus 80% of your effort on the 20% that makes up the biggest part of the cost, and then if you have time, then you can work on the rest, the small items. Project management. Let's say you're running projects, you're out in a job trailer, or you're responsible for running multiple projects. I've found that this is my wheelhouse. I've been managing projects for almost 20 years now, and I've found that there are a few areas that I can focus on that yield practically exponential results. And I've also found there's a lot of areas I can just ignore. There are some things I don't need to mess with, and they just take care of themselves, or they don't offer any value. So here are some of the things that I figured out where I really can add value, and if I focus 20% of my time on, or focus the majority of my time on these 20%, then that's where I'll see exponential results. And those areas are in plan review, just looking through plans, finding problems, finding holes, finding missing scope, reviewing plans and details, and getting issues worked out. Doing design coordination, coordinating between the different design partners and making sure that coordination details are worked out while they are lines on paper and before you get people out in the field. It's much more efficient, much more economical to resolve issues and get them coordinated while they're lines on, even before they're lines on paper, while they are bits of code in a Revit model or an AutoCAD. Also, contract buyout, buying out contract, defining scopes of work for subcontracts and suppliers. If you will spend a little bit more time on getting your contracts bought out, looking through the scope, defining those things, you'll eliminate a whole lot of problems that could be kicking your butt right now. And then also subcontractor coordination, simply getting everybody in the trailer or in an office once a week, twice a week, whatever it takes, and just coordinating, getting people talking to each other, building the relationship with your subcontractors. That I found to have tremendous value. Beyond that, a lot of the stuff, as I said, doesn't add any value to the process. For example, if you're spending 3 hours making your meeting minutes perfect and extremely detailed, then chances are you're not getting a lot of value out of that. When you're writing emails, you could be writing these eloquent emails with lots of background and lots of references, and you know you're probably not getting much more value. If you need to figure out where can I spend 20% of my time and get 80% of the output. So that's project management. Number 7, if you are dealing with equipment and tools, which if you're in the construction industry, chances are you deal with equipment and tools. Chances are most of the problems and expenses come from 20% of your vehicles, tools, or equipment, or your problems are coming from the lack of tools, equipment, and vehicles. So that's where you need to focus your preventative maintenance and your capital purchasing dollars. Also, look at the money that you're spending on rentals. Figure out where are you spending 80% of your money. Chances are you're spending 80% of your money renting equipment, renting a small number of pieces of equipment. And that small number of pieces of equipment, that's where you need to look at making purchases to avoid those rental costs. Also, on the flip side, it's very likely that 80% of your production is coming from 20% of your equipment fleet. So you likely have money sitting around. You may have yellow pieces of iron sitting around in your yard that you have money tied up in, and you're using it very infrequently. So you've got money sitting in equipment that you're not using, and you would be better off to sell that equipment, rent something for the occasional need, and then deploy that capital into the equipment that you're currently renting or the stuff that you need the most, so you can actually get some value out of it. Number 8, personal productivity. Personal productivity. Let's talk about you, not your crew, not your subcontractors, not your equipment, but you. 80%, maybe even 90% of your effectiveness and impact comes from 10 to 20% of your activities. Now, let me say that again. 80 to 90% of your effectiveness and impact to the bottom line of your business, whatever you're doing, 80 to 90% of your impact comes from 10 to 20% of your activities. Remember, I said earlier that in business, almost every activity is a waste of your time, and very few things are exceptionally valuable. So what may seem a little counterintuitive is that it may not seem that all the 10 to 20% of your activities may not seem all that, quote, productive, and you may not get immediate gratification from it. In other words, another way of saying that is we tend to get a lot of gratification when we're the hero, when we go into firefighter mode and there's some crisis and we can jump in and put on our superhero cape and save the day, right? That's when we get gratification. But I'm here to tell you that that's probably not the best use of your time. The best use of your time would be to go prevent those crises and emergencies, and operate at more of a steady state. So 10 to 20% of your activities are the most impactful to the bottom line of your organization. So these things may not seem all that productive. You may not get a lot of immediate gratification from it. You may not seem like the hero, but some of these things could be. It could be the best use of your time is developing customer relationships, taking your customers out to lunch, going by their office, getting to know them, deepening that relationship. Could be spending time in the field with your people. It could be walking around job sites. This is one of my favorite things to do. Doesn't seem all that productive, but I have caught so many problems, and before they were problems, just by walking around job sites and staring at piles of dirt, staring at manholes, staring at steel columns, staring at HVAC equipment, looking at roofing details. It could be that the best use of your time would be reviewing shop drawings. Doesn't seem very sexy at all, but if you can catch problems on shop drawings and submittals in that phase, then you'll eliminate crises down the road. The best use of your time may be just sitting down and planning 3 to 6 months into the future, scheduling your project, making long-range plans for your business. It could be recruiting, looking down the road at what does your company need to grow 3 to 6 months down the road, 2 years down the road, and then finding those people, developing relationships, deepening your network before you need to hire somebody. It could be networking. It could be going to trade shows and walking around talking to other people in the business, getting new ideas, because who knows what one good idea can be worth to your business. Best use of your time could be listening to insightful podcasts for construction leaders. Again, one of the best uses of your time could be listening to insightful podcasts for construction leaders just like this one. So those 8 things. Let me recap the 8 areas where you can leverage this 80-20 principle. Safety, profits, your employees, your crew's productivity, estimating, project management, equipment and tools, and then last, personal productivity. So now, what do you do with this information? What do you do now? How do you tap into this principle to increase your output by decreasing your input? Well, first of all, you're going to have to get over the idea that you need to get over this idea that you have to work more to get more results. This is a kind of a limiting belief. The reality is you can get more results by doing less. And in fact, your job is to do less. Focus your energy in fewer areas to get more results. That's going to require a mind shift change for some of you. So I've got 4 action items for you. A couple of years ago, I had a client that I dealt with, and they came up with this term after meetings. They had hot action items, the hot action items after a meeting, but frankly, that was a little bit inappropriate. Felt a little weird saying that. So we're going to call these action items. So 4 action items for you so you can leverage the 80-20 principle in your business. Number 1, look at last year's financials. Look at your P&L reports from last year. See which customers accounted for the bulk of your profits. Not revenue, I'm looking at profit. Okay? See which customers accounted for the bulk of your profits, and then I want you to define the characteristics of those customers. Geography, what industry were they in? What type of work did you do for them? The project size, the contract type. Was it a unit price contract, lump sum, GMP, design build, etc.? Define the characteristics of those customers where the majority of your profits came from. This will give you an avatar of what your best new customers look like. And then you need to focus your business development efforts on finding more customers just like them. And then on the flip side, you need to avoid working with customers who don't look like that. I'm here to tell you, you don't need to take every project that comes down the road. Unless you're a philanthropist and you like to give money away, it's very likely that working with every customer that comes down the pike could be costing you a lot of money every year. You would be better off not doing work for bad customers. Again, you would be better off not doing work for bad customers to keep your resources available for going after the good customers. Action item number 2, safety. I want you to make a list of the 4 highest risk activities in your operation, or the list of the top 4 areas where you've had the most incidents. This could be leading edge work. It could be confined spaces, hot work. Maybe you're doing trenching work. If you're an electrical contractor, then you're probably working around energized circuits. But figure out the 4 highest risk activities, or where you've had the most incidents, and then focus 80% of your training and inspection efforts on those 4 things. Remember what OSHA found is that almost 60% of the fatalities came from what they called the fatal 4. So find the 4 areas in your business where the highest risk lives, and then focus 80% or more of your training and inspection efforts right there. Number 3, employees. Think about your most productive, effective, profitable, and successful employees. Chances are there's a handful that spring to mind. Then, just like you did with your customers, define the characteristics of these most successful employees. What's their work background before they came to work for you? What's their personality like? Maybe you want to do a DISC profile or some sort of personality test so you can measure and kind of quantify what their personality's like. Did they play sports? Did they not play sports? Are they a mom? I heard Dave Ramsey, I think it was Dave Ramsey, talked about he had a position that he recommended on some projects called the vice president of the last 5%. And he said the best candidates for that job were they were most likely a woman, preferably a mom, because moms are extremely detail oriented, they get stuff done, and they get down to the nitty gritty. One of the characteristics could be, are they a former military? Did they grow up on a farm? Do they like the outdoors? Are they hunters? Just figure out what are the characteristics. What do they like to do? What's their personality like? And then make a list of these characteristics, and then use that list whenever you need to hire someone new. Now, you're not going to put that in a job description necessarily, but you'll find that the vast majority of your best employees tend to look alike. You'll see some trends among those best employees. Now, the last one, number 4, your personal productivity. Personal productivity. At the end of the day today, I want you to make a list of the top 5 things that you need to do tomorrow. What are the top 5 things that you absolutely need to do tomorrow? In other words, think about what are the things, ask yourself, what are the things I can do that will be like a lead domino? Like when you knock over the lead domino, what are these things that will cause other items just to take care of themselves, or other items to be unnecessary? Or what are the things you can do tomorrow that would eliminate future work? Where can you invest your time tomorrow and get a return on that investment by avoiding effort and time down the road? These things could be, you may need to deal with a problem employee. You may need to make that sales call. Maybe it's doing a schedule for your project, or spending more time on an estimate for a project you're bidding. Whatever it is, figure out the top 5 things that you really need to do tomorrow, then put them in the order of priority, which will have the most impact to the bottom line. Now, once you have your list of the top 5 things, then cross off the bottom 4 items. Okay? Get down to a list of 1 thing that you need to do tomorrow, and then open up the calendar on your phone or in Outlook, and then schedule a 60-minute time slot tomorrow morning before 11 a.m. to complete that thing. Put it in your calendar, get a reminder, schedule 60 minutes, get it done before 11 a.m. tomorrow, and then you can deal with everything else. But put the first things first. I think Peter Drucker, the great management guru, once said, do first things first, and second things not at all. Do first things first, do second things not at all. So remember what Warren Buffett said, one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet. He said this: what you don't do is just as important as what you do. Now, if you want some more information on the 80-20 principle and how that actually looks in business and in your life, I would strongly suggest you check out a book called Essentialism. Essentialism by Greg McKeown, McKeown. Essentialism, it's about focusing on the vital few and eliminating the non-essential many. That wraps up this episode of the Construction Leading Edge podcast. Again, my name is Todd DeWalt. Thanks for listening. If you'd like more information like this, you can follow me on Twitter at ConLeadEdge, or you can sign up for the Construction Leading Edge Nation and get insider information, tips, and tricks just like this in your email box. Go to constructionleadingedge.com/nation. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.